People of Reddit who work the day shift at non-haunted businesses and don't spend all your time in the woods, what's the creepiest thing you've experienced? I work in residential environments as a service technician. I go to houses and apartments and condos to do my thing. I was working in one particular condo building with over 70 floors and about 8 elevators. The elevators are in 2 groups of 4, with 2 giant elevator shafts. Just picture one giant square that is the lobby and 2 smaller rectangles in that room that are the elevator shafts. The 2 shafts are identical looking. This is relevant because it's easy to get disoriented as to which direction you are facing when you exit an elevator. Anyways, after doing a bit of work on the 65th floor unit, I realized I had to go to parking level 1 to a utility room. No big deal, and I hop on the elevator and press P1, and take a lonely ride down 60 plus floors. I reach P1 level, and when the elevator doors open, I hear weeping. I'm immediately worried about whoever is crying, so I start to pinpoint where the noise is coming from. It's a child crying, and since all the walls in this area are bare and concrete, the sound echoes and seems to be coming from everywhere. Panic didn't set in until I had searched 4 corners of the square room and hadn't found anyone. Now I'm no mathematician, but I'm pretty sure 4 corners are all of them, so my mind starts racing. I decided to nope out and head back to the door that would eventually lead me to the utility room that I was supposed to be working in, which I had already passed earlier on my search. I round the corner, and there I found the source of the noise. It's a little girl crouched down with straight black hair, sobbing into her knees facing the corner. I don't know why I didn't see her before because I already checked that corner. So, either I am mistaken, or she heard me get off the elevator and was actively moving away from me. For a moment, I considered running because that shit looked like it was straight out of the Ring, but that moment of nonsense subsided, and I asked her what's wrong. Turns out she was just lost and scared, so I escorted her back to the concierge desk, so security could help her back to her room. Nothing really creepy after the fact, but for a moment, I thought she would turn around with no face or something. New Year's Day, 1995. I was in the middle of 3rd year university, and a bunch of friends had come down to visit me and my roommate for the festivities. We were all pretty hungover from drinking the night before and went out for the usual nice day out, a bit chilly. I don't feel so good post-greasy breakfast hungover stroll around the neighborhood. 2 of these friends were twin brothers. One of them, we hung out with all the time. The other we just met for the first time. He was pretty normal the night before, joining in the fun. But on this day, we were all hanging around a local basketball court shooting hoops with an old basketball we'd found in the grass, and this twin brother kept following me around all over the place with the creepiest grin I'd ever seen in my life. Staring right into the nether regions of my soul, the whole time. I'd back away and join the group again, and he'd keep following me around. When we were walking back to the apartment, it was just him and I, walking down the sidewalk behind the group. He moved over in front of me, stared at me with that creepy look again, and fell down to his knees as if to worship me or something. I didn't know what to do. "Hey, buddy. You alright? We're heading back now, right?" And so on. He wouldn't say anything, he'd just be there on his knees, looking up at me with a clenched face and squinted eyes, as if he were looking directly into the sun or something. Later that day, my roomie said he was tripping balls, so I thought nothing of it and moved on with my life. A few weeks later, we got a phone call from the twin brother we usually hung out with, and it turned out that this other twin brother went over to his aunt's place with a knife and stabbed her 14 times. She didn't die, but still pretty bad. He had even called the police before going, because he knew he was going to do it, but he couldn't stop himself from doing it, because the voices and so on. The ensuing court case was widely covered in the media as this was a relatively smaller community where this sort of thing doesn't happen on a regular basis. I was reading one of the articles, and one of the testimonies was that this twin brother was severely schizophrenic and was hearing voices in his head. He believed to his very bones that his aunt was the devil, and that he had been commanded by God to go and kill her. So, who was this God that told him to go kill her? Well, as the newspaper article described, it was a guy in a group he hung out with on New Year's Day. Didn't take me long to realize that he was talking about me. This was 22 years ago. I know for a fact it was a mental illness, but just knowing that I had somehow commanded him to go kill his aunt stays with me to this day. I am fairly small for a guy. I stand at around 5 feet 5 inches, and the most I've ever weighed was around 150 pounds about 6 or 7 years ago. I didn't have my license despite being far old enough to drive, but a good buddy of mine wanted to hang out. He too did not have a way of transport, so we decided to walk towards one another and meet in the middle. We would both be walking 5 miles. It was 3 a.m. on a cold winter night, and I was wearing a black jacket with my hood up. About 2 miles into my hike along the main road, a car pulled into a parking spot of a home I was passing, just a few feet behind me. He wasn't entirely into the driveway, almost halfway hanging out into the road. I half expected it was just a kind stranger wanting to give me a ride, but I wasn't about to take any rides from anybody. I kept pacing forward and ignored the car behind me, expecting them to roll down a window and shout at me. It didn't happen. The car just sat at the edge of that driveway, running but completely dark inside to the point that I could only barely make out the figure of a large man. I don't typically get frightened by much, but something in the air made me tense up, and my heart kind of dropped to my stomach. I stopped and turned to look at the car, and I had a feeling that the person driving was watching me intently. The figure in the car was definitely facing me. I could see the reflection from his dash bouncing off of his eyes. I stared back. I figured he was about to yell out to me, but he just sat quietly in a strangely menacing way that I have only ever seen scenes in movies play out. I kinda did a wave at the figure, letting him know I saw him, and waited for some type of communication in return. He didn't budge, just stared intently. I returned to pacing away, slightly brisker. After just a few moments, I could hear the car slowly roll in reverse, so I turned to face it but kept pacing backward. The car kept creeping slowly. I pulled down my hood and stood still again, waiting for him to pass me. But instead, the man slowed to a stop beside me. The passenger side window rolled down, and the man and I met eyes. No words were exchanged at all, and before I could even let out a hello, the man grimaced and accelerated away at a decent pace, almost as if he was disappointed by what he had seen. It doesn't seem like much from how it reads, but I'll never forget how tense that interaction was for me. I've not felt anything like it since. I was playing the PC game Black and White, not a horror game, shortly after it came out. It was late at night, and suddenly I hear my speakers whisper my name. There was no reason for it. Nothing happened on screen, just my computer whispering my name. Scared the crap out of me. Years later, I found out that they had recorded common names in one of the game files, and if the name on your profile matched the name they had recorded, it would have a small chance to randomly play while you were playing. Every few months, in a department with over 20 women, we'd all come in nearly identical outfits. It was odd. We were all ages and races and styles, but there'd be a day when everyone would show up in a black skirt and red blouse. A few months later, everyone was in brown slacks and a cream-colored dress shirt. A few months later, gray skirt and a black sweater. We could never figure out the trigger, TV show character looking fly in that outfit the night before, a visitor to the building who appeared polished, nothing. It always creeped me out, as it seemed to represent some groupthink or collective consciousness working on us. I am a teacher of adult students, and one student of mine is kind of intense and creepy. Actually, she's based at another school, but specifically started attending classes at my school after meeting me. When I first started, she kept giving me welcome presents as I was new to the country. Just simple things like food, postcards, and books were a nice idea, but it seemed a little excessive. She added me on social media and then got upset when I didn't reply to her constant messages. I told her that I don't really use social media. Anyway, I didn't see her for a few months and figured she'd just gone back to her own school or stopped studying or whatever, and was relieved that she'd clearly got bored of me. But then last week, she comes in and gives me an envelope full of photos of me during lessons that she'd taken, without me knowing. I was a little weirded out, to say the least. When I was 17 and worked in retail as a cashier, I had a very old couple come through my line buying a wok. The husband, who was at least 85, started making conversation with me about the wok, and asked if I liked Chinese food. Yeah, I like Chinese. Do you want to go out with me to get some Chinese? He winks at me. No, sir. Oh. Well. He looks a bit disappointed and turns to look at his wife, who is on the phone with someone. Would you at least like to come home with me and live in my basement? No. The rest of the transaction took place in terrified silence. His wife never said a word. I wonder to this day if he was trying to joke, because he sounded so sincere, or if he was suffering from dementia or something else that makes him not realize how creepy that sounds to someone young enough to be your great-grandchild. Not creepy, but definitely frightening. I used to manage a small family-owned retail store. It was the 4th of July, and the owners, of course, took the day off and dropped the responsibility on me. We had 2 stock boys bringing up some items on the forklift when I heard banshee screaming coming from outside the storefront. One of them comes flying through the front door on one leg, spewing profanity before collapsing on the ground. I look down and see his actual ankle, like the bone. Blood is going everywhere. The dude was riding tandem on the forklift, A giant safety no-no, when the driver took a hard turn and sent the kid off the side, running over his foot. The driver screeched to a halt, and he thought he stopped on the kid's foot. He didn't, so he popped the forklift in reverse and ran over the foot again. Anyway, I learned that day that I keep my cool in emergency situations. Grabbed and elevated the kid's foot. Instructed someone to call 911. Always tell a specific person to call 911, never say someone call 911, and another person to get towels to try and stop the bleeding. I held his foot up until the EMTs came. They managed to save the kid's foot, but he had a battle ahead of him. His foot went necrotic, and he went septic, I think that's the right term, at one point, but he survived. I don't work there anymore. There were many unsafe practices going on, and the owners didn't treat their employees very well. I left about 3 years ago, and surprise, surprise, they shut down about a year and a half later.